Welcome to DCS Global. We are here once again to provide you with the latest news. Ukrainian military intelligence, HUR, struck Russia's 52,116 base near Moscow, destroying 2 Valdai radar stations. In Kursk, Ukrainian forces eliminated an electronic warfare system and a Mista B howitzer, further pressuring Russian defenses. Let's get into the details. Ukrainian military intelligence HUR targets the Russian capital. An operation against a Russian military facility off the coast of Moscow has turned the capital into an open target for Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles. The explosions that completely destroyed 2 advanced Russian radar stations have added another nightmare to the Kremlin's woes. Failing even to defend the capital against external threats, Russian leader Vladimir Putin and his administration have become the focal point of nationwide criticism. The latest developments in the ongoing war, which has been raging since February 24, 2022, have fundamentally shifted the balance of power. Over the past year, the Ukrainian armed forces have significantly enhanced their capabilities in conducting cross-border operations, allowing them to effectively target even critical military-industrial infrastructure deep within Russia. With every successful strike, they further cripple Russian combat operations. The primary weapon used in this strategic offensive has been Ukraine's domestically produced unmanned aerial vehicles. In a short period, Ukrainian drone operators have integrated a wide array of UAV models into their arsenal, significantly increasing their range and destructive capacity. Their relentless operations have exposed Russia's alarming vulnerability to external threats. Having failed to anticipate that the war could spill onto their own soil, Russian officials have been unable to implement new security measures in time. They have been left with no choice but to rely on their previously deployed radar stations and air defense systems. However, the latest operation, orchestrated by Ukraine's highly skilled counterintelligence service, has shattered even this last line of defense. A statement regarding the operation was released by the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, HUR, on February 13, 2025. HUR officials confirmed that the operation took place in the early hours of February 7, 2025, targeting a Russian military facility just outside Moscow. The critical detail of this operation was the specific target, the 52,116 military base in Dolgoprudny, near Moscow. Ukrainian military intelligence emphasized that this base was responsible for securing the airspace of the Moscow region. Yet, instead of ensuring Moscow's safety, the base could not even protect itself. Throughout the night of February 6 to 7, 2025, a series of powerful explosions devastated the base, reducing it to rubble. The most significant aspect of this operation, which sent shockwaves through the Russian government, was the destruction of 2 Valdai model radar stations within the base. According to HUR, the Valdai system was the first of its class adopted by the Russian army. Designed to operate around the clock, this radar system was one of the latest innovations developed by the Russian defense industry giant Almaz-Antey. Development of the Valdai radar began in 2016, and it was first deployed in 2022. Following the full-scale invasion, Russia had also deployed these radars to the front lines in Ukraine. The primary function of the Valdai system was to detect and neutralize small, low-speed aerial targets, including mini and micro UAVs. Its detection range extended from 4 to 6 kilometers for small drones like the DJI Mavic and DJI Phantom, up to 15 kilometers for larger UAVs. The system was also capable of disrupting control and data transmission channels within a 2-kilometer radius and jamming satellite navigation signals within the same range. With its ability to refresh tracking data every 2.5 seconds and its integration with a 360-degree optical electronic surveillance system, the Valdai radar was hailed as a cutting-edge multifunctional defense platform. Additionally, it was designed to work in coordination with the Volk-18 drone interceptor. However, these capabilities remained purely theoretical, as the radar system utterly failed to provide any effective security, dealing a severe blow to Russia's defense industry. Apart from the destruction of the 2 Valdai radar stations, neither side has yet provided official details on what other equipment was eliminated at the 52116 military base. However, Russia's continued silence on the matter, even a week after the event, suggests that Russian authorities are actively trying to conceal the incident. Nonetheless, if Russian officials continue to waste time suppressing the truth rather than addressing the situation, Ukraine's counterintelligence and defense forces will persist in turning Russia's critical radar stations, air defense systems, and various other military assets into mere scrap metal. Just days after the destruction of the Valdai radar systems near Moscow, another development in Russia's Kursk Oblast provided further evidence supporting this claim. The Ukrainian armed forces, who have been conducting a ground offensive in Kursk for over 6 months, launched a devastating attack on February 12, 2025, striking deep into Russian-held territory. The operation, led by the 140th Center of the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces Command, targeted Russian positions identified through reconnaissance drones. The most notable achievements of this precision strike included the destruction of a Russian R-330 Zhizhtel electronic warfare system and a 152mm Mista-B howitzer. Footage recorded by FPV drones showed Ukrainian forces using high-precision artillery munitions to target the R-330 ZH system, causing multiple explosions at the site and eliminating the Russian crew responsible for its operation. OSINT analysts confirmed that the system was destroyed near the village of Belitsa in the Kursk region. Following this success, another aerial reconnaissance mission detected a Russian Mista-B howitzer, prompting Ukrainian special forces to launch an artillery strike that rendered the weapon inoperable. The 152mm Mista-B howitzer, destroyed north of the settlement of Spalno in the Kursk region, had been used by Russian forces to disrupt the Ukrainian army's satellite communications and navigation signals. Meanwhile, the R-330 Zhizhtel electronic warfare system was responsible for direction finding and radio emissions analysis, as well as jamming satellite communication terminals, GPS navigation systems, and GSM cellular networks. The elimination of these systems significantly degraded Russian forces' situational awareness and communication capabilities on the battlefield. The Ukrainian armed forces have now reached a level of operational effectiveness where they can directly target and destroy Russian military assets, even inside Russian territory. This remarkable progress has stunned military analysts worldwide. With each passing day, the Russian Federation's military finds itself increasingly incapable of responding to Ukraine's escalating pressure, plunging into one of the worst crises in its history. The extent of Russia's losses is best illustrated by the Ukrainian General Staff's regularly published casualty reports. According to the latest report dated February 13, 2025, the Russian armed forces suffered 1,250 personnel losses in the past 24 hours alone. With this, the total number of Russian casualties since the full-scale invasion began on February 24, 2022, has reached 854,280. The report also details Russia's catastrophic military equipment losses, valued at hundreds of billions of dollars. Since the start of the war, Russia has lost 10,040 tanks, 20,894 armored combat vehicles, 37,096 vehicles and fuel tanks, 23,034 artillery systems, 1,278 multiple launch rocket systems, 1,063 air defense systems, 370 aircraft, 331 helicopters, 25,072 unmanned aerial vehicles, 28 ships and boats, 1 submarine. Experts predict that Ukraine's persistent airstrikes on Russian military infrastructure will continue to erode the enemy's warfighting capabilities. With frontline Russian forces unable to receive reinforcements, large-scale retreats may soon become inevitable. Saratov, one of the critical regions of Russia, has once again become the center of war. The armed forces of Ukraine, which targeted the oil refinery and the military airbase in the region, dealt a very heavy blow to the enemy. The invading Russian army, which had to stop both frontline aviation and logistics activities within hours in the face of the attack, experienced a nightmare. The details of the latest operation, which once again show how vulnerable the Russian regions are to external threats, have had a huge impact on the agenda of the whole world. The Ukrainian armed forces, which have now reached the capacity to organize cross-border airstrikes as a daily routine, have completely changed their role in the war. With the appointment of Colonel General Oleksandr Syrsky as commander-in-chief last year, the Ukrainian forces, which have made a critical change in their strategy, have started to focus on operations targeting Russia's critical infrastructures with this change. The Moscow administration, which considers these attacks mostly using unmanned aerial vehicles insignificant, continued to spend all its resources on advancing the front line instead of securing the infrastructures inside the country. Turning Russia's negligent attitude into an opportunity, Kiev has reached a unique inventory of unmanned aerial vehicles along with the investments it has provided to the domestic defense industry in this process. These unmanned aerial vehicles, whose range capacity, hit rate, and impact size have increased critically with each development, have made the military-industrial infrastructure points in many regions of Russia no different from the battlefield by the first phase of 2025. However, the latest attack using these unmanned aerial vehicles has stunned even war analysts. The aforementioned attack was launched in the early hours of February 11, 2025. The first exchanges of Telegram channels linked to local eyewitnesses and Russian security services were that the target of the attack was the Saratov region of Russia. The Russian Telegram channel Astra claimed that as a result of the attack, an oil refinery in Saratov was damaged and a large fire occurred at the facility. This claim was supported by videos and photos recorded by local eyewitnesses from near the facility. Saratov Regional Governor Roman Busargin, who had to confirm the drone attack on the region after numerous allegations were made about the issue, said that a large number of UAVs targeted an industrial facility in Saratov, causing damage. Governor Busargin, who did not specify whether the facility was the oil refinery at the focus of the allegations, contented himself with saying that emergency teams were working in places where the wreckage of the UAV may have fallen. The Telegram channel Beware News took the allegations a step further and stated that the facility targeted by the attack was the Saratov oil refinery owned by the Rosneft company. In the videos shared, it was seen that a series of explosions occurred on the grounds of the facility as a result of the drone attack, and during this process, the Russian Air Defense Forces tried to illuminate the detected unmanned aerial vehicles with projectors. It is known that the Ukrainian army attacked the Saratov oil refinery twice recently, on January 8th and 14th, 2025. During the last operation on February 11th, 2025, the armed forces of Ukraine, which set multiple targets by displaying a similar attitude to the attacks in the past, also caused a nightmare to the Engels 2 military airbase. Russian Telegram channels Shot and Mash reported that at least 11 explosions were heard over the city of Engels in the Saratov region at around 4 a.m. The channels stated that gunshots resembling automatic weapons were echoed in addition to the sounds of explosions, suggesting that these sounds came from the direction of the Engels 2 airbase. Just an hour later, in another new post, Shot posted a video of a new explosion that occurred in the city of Engels at around 5 a.m. During this latest attack, new explosions were allegedly heard simultaneously in the Saratov region as well. Andriy Kovalenko made the first statement from the Ukrainian side regarding the attacks. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Combating Disinformation affiliated to the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, said, "The Saratov oil refinery was attacked. This is not the first attack. The Saratov oil refinery is one of the key facilities of the Russian fuel infrastructure. The refining capacity reaches 7 million tons of oil per year. The facility plays an important role in supplying fuel to the Russian military. Even during the Second World War, it was critical for military logistics and remains an important element of fuel supply today." After this statement, which summarized the justification of the attack in detail, all attention was directed to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Explaining the purpose, process, and results of the attack in detail in a Facebook post later in the day, Ukrainian General Staff officials underlined that the Ukrainian Unmanned Systems Forces, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense and Special Operations Forces troops, acted in a coordinated manner during the attack. Stating that the refinery produces more than 20 petroleum products in total, mainly gasoline, fuel oil, and diesel fuel, Ukrainian officials said that the plant and the Rosneft company to which the plant is affiliated have publicly provided support to the occupying Russian army. Confirming that a fire broke out at the facility that was hit as a result of the attack, and saying that the results of the operation had been clarified, the Ukrainian General Staff said, Attacks against strategic targets involved in the continuation of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine will continue. The command of the Unmanned Systems Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine said, "Unmanned systems forces continue to conduct accurate attacks on the enemy's strategic objects and deprive the enemy of the resources necessary for them to conduct the war. We're one step ahead." The attacks on the Saratov region took place just a few hours after the Ukrainian army's operation on Russia's Krasnodar region. During the operation of February 10, 2025, a large number of Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles entered Krasnodar airspace and targeted the Afipsky oil refinery, a key oil center of southwestern Russia. Stating that the mentioned refinery is one of the most important refineries in Russia, with an annual oil capacity of 6.25 million tons, Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Ukrainian Anti-Disinformation Center, said that the facility supplies fuel for military equipment, especially to the occupying Russian forces on the southern front. Explaining why the facility is considered a legitimate target and what impact the attack on the facility will have on the battlefield, Kovalenko said, "Its location in the Krasnodar Krai makes it an important logistics center for the supply of diesel fuel and aviation kerosene used by the army. Therefore, the Afipsky oil refinery is not only an industrial facility, but also an important element of Russia's military infrastructure." Despite the statement from Ukraine, the Russian Defense Ministry, which made a much more uniform claim and stated that 15 unmanned aerial vehicles were intercepted during the night, suggested that 7 of these UAVs were shot down over the Krasnodar region, while the others were shot down over Bryansk, Belgorod, Kursk, Rostov, and Crimea. The main interesting point was that the Afipsky oil refinery was located right next to the 90th Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade of the 49th Combined Arms Army of Russia. Considering that the brigade is equipped with Buk M2 and Buk M3 model air defense systems, in fact, the last attack organized by the Ukrainian army should have been easily repulsed. However, it has been proved again with these recent developments that the fancy statements of the Russian defense industry developers do not reflect the reality. The Ukrainian army, which has managed to target critical infrastructures in various regions of Russia many times within short intervals and dealt heavy blows to infrastructures, continues to increase cross-border pressure by adhering to its strategy. The Russian forces, who are close to impossible to allocate defense measures that they have not given the necessary importance until now, are being dragged into a very big crisis a short time before the negotiations begin. The invading Russian forces, which have suffered inventory casualties worth hundreds of billions of dollars and lost close to 900,000 soldiers during the war, cannot reach the reinforcement troops and inventory support they need due to the Ukrainian attacks targeting their own countries. Experts predict that if the process continues like this, the front line will approach the Russian borderline significantly in the later phase of 2025, which will provide Ukraine with a very critical advantage in possible negotiations. The Baltic states have cut off their connection with Russia this time. The networks, which are considered as blackmail elements by Russia, have suddenly turned in favor of the Baltic countries. Right after this incident, Ukraine and Sweden sat down at the table for a new cooperation during the escalation of tensions in the Baltic, and in an instant, everything became completely confused for Russia. In the last days of the Ukrainian war, the battlefield began to shift to a completely different point. The most important reason for this was the change in Russia's current policies. Russia's putting aside the order it wanted to establish by completely invading Ukraine in the first place, but instead its attitude based on a structure clear enough to have an impact on the whole world has started to lead things towards a complicated point. The fact that the policies to be followed in this area have come into shape in favor of the Ukrainian army over time has been recorded as a factor that Russia does not want. By being so threatening and aggressive, what Putin really aimed at was that every country that supported against the Russian military withdrew out of fear of the possibility of a possible world war. But this did not happen in the way that Putin wanted. He managed to make even many countries that followed these repressive policies of Russia, quite passive policies aggressive towards Russia. And these countries have pursued a more anti-Putin policy than ever before. At this point, Putin's aggressive sabotage in the Baltic through the shadow fleets has completely confused things, and the Baltic countries have taken action to take that critical step. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas stated that Russia has recently begun to use its energy exports as an element of threat and blackmail. Although this is a step that serves the empire of fear that Russia wants to establish in the Baltics have now mobilized the opportunities at their disposal to make a counter-move. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia are preparing to cut off the power grids in Moscow this Saturday, they said. Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas expressed that the severance of the Baltic states from Russian-controlled energy systems was a victory for freedom, while in fact it once again showed how high tensions in the Baltics are. Kallas said, "Russia can no longer use energy as a means of blackmail. This is a victory for freedom and for the European Union," he said. According to the statements of the LRT, this event was actually the destruction of Russia's means of dominating the countries around it, thanks to the centralized energy networks that have existed since the Soviet Union era. It has also been seen that a large number of countries that have been preparing to integrate into the European network for a long time will continue this process faster as a result of these recent events. In this event, which became even more urgent after the start of Russia's full-scale war, the obstacle posed by financial difficulties has also almost completely disappeared. In the event of national independence and the extension of the occupation to the Baltics have now begun to take firm, concrete steps. The Baltic states have also announced that they will no longer be part of the post-Soviet Brel power ring, which also includes Russia and Belarus, literally. President Volodymyr Zelensky said, "Ukraine has already done this in 2022, and now the Baltic countries have also got rid of addiction." Moscow will no longer be able to use energy as a weapon against the Baltic states. It also means that Europe is becoming even more integrated, said. "We need to work more closely with America, LNG, gas, oil. In this region, we need to work more closely with our partners in neighboring countries of the European Union to import the necessary energy. The Caucasus, the Middle East, North Africa," Zelensky said, clearly indicating that they had foreseen this process before. Zelensky said, "I congratulate our friends, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, on today's achievements. It is important for Poland to help because it proves once again that cooperation between us means the independence of each of us," he concluded. But although this has dealt major blows to Russia's energy and economic fields, it has become a necessity to corner Russia from a military point of view as well. And the important countries in the Baltics contacted Ukraine one after the other and took a new step towards managing the process together. The commander of the Ukrainian naval forces, Vice Admiral Oleksiy Nejpapa, and the commander-in-chief of the Swedish Armed Forces, General Michael Claesson, recently signed a very critical meeting. General Oleksandr Syrski, commander-in-chief of the armed forces, took part in this meeting, which is based on the active use of unmanned naval systems, which are of the greatest importance in the current order, in combat. The enemy's main goal remains unchanged, to block Ukraine's access to the sea. To this end, Russia continues to try to disrupt navigation in our waters. Nejpapa said that the Russian invaders are also concentrating on air and naval reconnaissance. He expressed that the policies to be followed against Russia, which is trying to create a new area of dominance in the Baltics, are gradually becoming more important. The enemy is not stopping its airstrikes against peaceful cities, residential areas, and critical infrastructures, Claesson said. The Russians are trying to take over Ukraine through terror and destruction by launching missiles and drones every day, said. However, as there is a unity of forces against Russia, some policies aimed at increasing the many advantages that Ukraine has achieved have also been recorded. In this area, the latest statement released by the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that the Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Iceland, Ireland, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway, Poland, Romania, and Sweden should take this step, which will surprise the whole world with a joint letter. And in an instant, the circle for Russia has narrowed down very seriously. The joint letter calls on the G7, a group of leading industrialized countries, to reduce Russia's revenues from the sale of energy carriers. The letter addressed to the G7 countries said, "With these revenues, Russia is financing its ongoing aggression in Ukraine. A third of Russia's revenues and two-thirds of its exports depend on energy carriers." It was said, the shadow fleets, which are seen as one of the main agenda issues, were also included in this joint letter. Russia is using the shadow fleet to finance its war machine. The ships of the shadow fleet are often old and in poor condition, posing environmental, maritime safety, and security risks in Europe and in our waters, the statement said. While it is stated that the oil price limit issue should be actively observed, it is stated that Russia's basic policies are directly proportional to other steps to be taken in this area. Therefore, it is estimated that the anti-Putin wind will strengthen and evolve into a storm in a short time. In addition, Estonian President Alar Karis said in a statement, "The European Union should further increase independence and end all Russian energy imports to the EU. We should even seriously consider imposing a full trade embargo on Russia," said. In other words, it has been confirmed in this way that Estonia is one of Russia's main targets. Immediately after this incident, Lithuania took that critical step, and he's about to make a much bigger move against the Russian army. The Lithuanian Ministry of Defense announced in a recent statement that it has donated trucks and spare parts for M113 armored personnel carriers. While the transfer of vehicles and spare parts is described as an urgent need to support Ukraine's defense capabilities, which will be converted into significant and comprehensive assistance this year, it is also the main reason that Russia is literally considered an enemy. After that, Latvia introduced the production of the first batch of Patria 6x6 armored personnel carriers for the Ukrainian Defense Forces, while at the same time preparing to prepare military assistance to Ukraine, and these assistance can be examined under many basic headings, such as Patria armored personnel carriers, unmanned aerial vehicles, and training for soldiers. Besides, Denmark, which is still taking patrol steps against Russia, which is still actively engaged in sabotage activities, has changed its policy of non-interference with maritime navigation in the Baltic Sea and has taken action to control the seas that they think may pose a threat. This is being done in relation to the activities of older vessels transporting oil through the Denmark Strait, which leads to increased risks and concerns about the safety of navigation, crew, and the environment, the Danish Maritime Authority said in a statement on the matter. And he has once again shown the whole world how hard the attitude towards the Russian shadow fleet will harden. The Ukraine-Russia war is about to leave 3 years behind. The war of occupation of Ukraine, which started with the superiority of the Russian army, continues today with the superiority of Ukraine. Ukrainian intelligence and troops are taking their revenge on the Russian commanders who caused destruction in Ukraine. Ukrainian troops are ensuring that the Russian army suffers great losses in all respects with clever planned operations in 2024. The Ukrainian intelligence is targeting Russian commanders who are conducting destructive operations in the Donetsk and Kharkiv regions. Armen Sargsyan, the commander of the Arbat battalion, a supporter of Russia, was seriously injured as a result of an explosion in the building where he was located. According to information obtained from a Russian news channel, he died in the hospital where he was taken. It is estimated that the explosion in which the Russian commander lost his life was organized by Ukrainian intelligence. Although the explanations of the Russian authorities are that it was an accident, the reason for the explosion is that it was caused by an explosive placed in the building. The Russian media constantly carried out side news during the war, allowing the Russian people to be deceived that the war was progressing in a good direction. However, the fact that Ukrainian troops constantly broadcast their organized operations on social media platforms has caused the Russian people to understand that Ukraine's superior war is getting worse for Russia. Ukrainian troops have been repeatedly conducting operations against Russian troops on their own territory, which is under occupation. Some of the commanders commanding the Russian troops lost their lives in these operations. The locations of the Russian troops are determined by the extremely meticulous disciplinary work of the Ukrainian intelligence. After the transfer of information to the Ukrainian troops, air and ground attacks are carried out on the Russian troops whose locations are determined. In these operations, many Russian soldiers, including their commanders, are neutralized, while all the combat equipment they have is destroyed. Thanks to this, Russian troops are experiencing a shortage of ammunition and equipment today. Ukraine has begun to use drones and unmanned aerial vehicles much more effectively in combat, thanks to its development in weapons defense. The commander of the Storm Battalion of the Russian Army has lost his life in an operation conducted by drones and unmanned aerial vehicles on his vehicle, as a result of investigations by Ukrainian intelligence. It is known that the Ukrainian intelligence has achieved all its goals respectively. The main goal is to ensure the withdrawal of the Russian invaders from Ukraine. In line with this goal, the Ukrainian troops are continuing their progress with confident steps. As it is known, it was the biggest cross-border target that would make Putin give up. On the morning of August 6th, having achieved this goal, Ukrainian troops began to organize operations in the Kursk region that would plunge Russia into disaster. Ukrainian troops primarily destroyed shipping lines through which Russian troops could receive support and assistance. Then Russian command centers, headquarters, ammunition fuel depots, war equipment production factories, most importantly, oil storage facilities were targeted. The army of Russian leader Putin, who launched the invasion war very strongly, has suffered great material and spiritual losses today. Putin, who launched the unjust war of invasion of Ukraine with great self-confidence in February 2022, is in great despair today. In the statements of the first day, it is stated that the war will be invaded Ukraine in a short period of 3 or 4 months without experiencing material and moral loss, which will not be felt on Russian territory. Today, the war is experiencing its hottest form on Russian territory. Russia has lost close to 8,000 military casualties and millions worth of combat equipment. Considering that Putin will invade the war in a short time, it is understood how impossible it is to allocate a 1-year war budget and cover the war costs if we think that 3 years of the war will be left behind. With the embargoes of many countries against Russia at the beginning of the war, the Russian economy received its first blow. Russian leader Putin's plans to make himself felt in Europe after the Ukrainian war should have been blocked. The United States and Western countries have begun to support Ukraine with their decisions that this will be prevented if Ukraine wins the war. These supports have caused Putin's plans to change. Thanks to these support packages, Ukraine has closed the year 2024 at the top. In the first month of the new year, it has achieved great success by destroying the oil refinery, which is the basis of Russia's economy. The fact that Putin has reached a point in the war that he never expected has made him realize that he cannot win this war alone. Putin has always considered the large number of troops as a strength. For this reason, he resorted to various ways to increase the decreasing number of soldiers. The first of these, and the mobilization announcements that caused a great public reaction, sent Russian citizens to fight. Russian recruits who did not even know how to hold a weapon allowed Ukrainian troops to conduct very easy operations on the fronts. It is known that the entry of Ukrainian troops into the Kursk region was caused by the weaknesses of these recruits. Putin's failure to concentrate on the Kursk region was mentioned by the world press as a ridiculous move. It was perceived as a big mistake for Putin to be late for operations in the Kursk region in order not to give away the territories he occupied with the bad course of the war. Ukrainian intelligence and troops are simultaneously conducting constant attacks on the Kursk region and in the occupied areas of Ukraine. The pace of these attacks has increased with the recent support package to Ukraine and the authorization for the use of long-range missiles. Ukraine has come much closer to absolute victory. The Ukrainian leader has realized the first 2 items of the absolute victory planning. With the attacks of Ukrainian troops and the assassinations of Russian commanders, it is a curious issue how much longer Putin will be able to withstand. As a result of the assassinations of Russian commanders, insurmountable problems have begun to appear in the Russian army. There were already great upheavals taking place within the Russian army. The disruption of the chain of command has caused the existing Russian army to increase its problems even more. One of the main comments of war analysts is on how long the Russian army, which has begun to run out of money against Ukraine's overwhelming operations, will last. April-May, we are seeing a proliferation of comments that the further prolongation of the war will make the Russian army unable to provide weapons to its soldiers, and its borders will remain completely unprotected. With Ukraine's investments in the production of drones and unmanned aerial vehicles, they have started to get effective results in all kinds of operations. The desired targets are being destroyed without the need for manpower. Russia's war on Ukraine has turned into a technology war. With the state-of-the-art combat equipment available in the support packages of the United States and Western countries, the strength of the Russian army has been weakened by a percentage today. Although Putin has violated all kinds of war to invade Ukraine, even though he has used all kinds of sabotage and agents, the whole world knows his failure in the war of occupation of Ukraine. Will the new US President Trump have a big impact on the end of the war? Trump had claimed that he would end the war with reconciliation in a short time. It seems that this compromise is not possible today. For this reason, He called on Putin to end the war. Otherwise, he would impose heavy sanctions. There has been no response from Putin to this call. But despite this call, Putin continues his inhumane attacks in Ukraine.